your name's on the thing, so I'm just.
No, I'm gonna sit back here and only come up as a
Okay.
We're on there.
All right. Well, good evening. Welcome to the September 20th, 2022 work session. First item tonight is Carefree Sunday event, which will be presented by Dan Harris, all on his own.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gamba, Council. Thank you all for having me here again. Sure enough, my name is Dan Harris. I'm the Events and Emergency Management Coordinator for the city. I use he, they pronouns, and I can be reached at harrisd@milwaukieoregon.gov or events@milwaukieoregon.gov for people who like to CC an org box. I'm here tonight to talk about, this afternoon, to talk about Carefree Sunday. Carefree Sunday took place most recently on August 7th of this last year. We were going to go originally from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., but ended up calling the event a bit early due to heat. It took place on the east side of Highway 224. Here was an example of our route. This year we expanded to a 5.5 mile route, up from 3.5 miles in 2019, up from one park at a time in 2020. I think it was an ambitious reach. As it says in the staff report, the cost of producing this event was not significantly different from the 2019 event. We were able to get a much larger area covered. So in theory, that expands the reach of the event. In practice, there were some environmental limitations that interfered with that. So issues that we identified with this year's event, high cost and low sponsorships. It's not actually, again, that it cost significantly more than it did in 2019, the last time that we put on the event at this kind of scale. It's that we were able to, we were forced to draw back on a number of things. So we had fewer vendors who we were able to recruit. We didn't have the same kind of sponsor support that we had in 2019. The same grant funding wasn't available. And so in practice, what that meant was that we were able to really fully build out two of our 4 activity areas. And fortunately, due to partnership with North Clackamas Parks and Rec, and then also Grace Point Church, we were able to fill out the other 2. But with the budget that we had available, we really were only able to fund entertainment for Ball Michel Park and for Water Tower Park. High temperatures and low turnout. The high temperature for the day, I believe, was 107 degrees Fahrenheit, and it hit that sometime around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But leading into that day, we had our one food vendor drop. When that food vendor dropped, that took the beer garden with it because they were no longer able to meet their OLCC licensing requirements. Our, I always want to say advisors, our consultants for the event, Axiom, who did a fantastic job on this, they had about half of their community volunteers, their second shift, fall out. They were not able to continue staffing the event after 1:30, which led to our decision to end the event early. So we're just going to continue to see these high temperatures in August by all forecasts. I know that's not something that I need to convince this council of, but in the interest of giving an account of the event, that's what we ran into. Like I said, also limited food vendors. What we found post-pandemic is that in addition to the relationship that folks have with heat, and I don't know if it was the fires or the heat dome or just people spending more time outside of community spaces in isolated spaces, we're not seeing the same kind of turnout on those hot days. And we saw a lot of our food vendors, food trucks, et cetera, either go out of business during the pandemic, or the ones that survived have largely gone one of 2 ways. Either they've moved into food cart pods and stay there, or they now expect to be treated more like a catering service where they'll want a minimum payment. So we did a fairly aggressive outreach on this, and what we came back with, like I said, was one vendor who was able to commit to that day. And then they dropped because of the heat. Because it's about 20 degrees hotter apparently in the kitchen of a food truck than it is outside, which absolutely safety first. And still, it sure would have been nice to have that vendor. Also, we did run into just kind of a standard problem, which is a miscommunication with the flaggers. That was not environmental. That was just, we could have done a better job communicating specifically with our flaggers about what it was that we were expecting from them at 42nd and Monroe, we had a problem that I think a couple of our counselors ran into, where they were stopping traffic in the wrong direction. This actually kind of speaks to a larger problem throughout the route. When we went to that 5.5 mile route, if we had had the 5,000 person turnout that we did in 2019, I think that 5.5 miles could have actually been quite a good thing. In practice, we had something closer to 600 people participating throughout the day. And so that created what I've been calling kind of a drained fire hose effect. When the pressure is up, vehicles see, hey, there are people coming through all the time. But when you've got 600 people spread out over the course of 5.5 miles, largely clustered around the parks, there's just not that same volume of traffic. And so we were getting into problems where we had drivers behaving aggressively toward our volunteers, toward our flaggers, and it just kind of snowballed on itself. So these issues being identified, we have some proposed solutions. And I think the easiest thing is a smaller and earlier event. Earlier in the year, potentially earlier in the day as well. What I'm suggesting and what I've suggested in the staff report is the Sunday before Memorial Day. And this year that falls on Dogwood Day, so we could have next year that falls on Dogwood Day, so we could very well have a Dogwood Day Carefree Sunday. I'm gonna work with Scott because Scott cares more than anyone about getting that name right. We're gonna make sure we find it. The reason that we looked at that, as I say in the staff report, is that the event right now takes place in August, the hottest part of the year. If we go too much later, then we run into September and back to school problems, and then into bad weather in October, and further unbalance the events calendar, which right now is pretty heavily weighted toward winter events. If we move it to July, people are on vacation. If we move it to June, we've got Pride and Juneteenth. So that puts us back to May. Of course, we don't want to do it on Memorial Day weekend. So that drops us into the earliest that we could possibly do it without running back into a pretty solid guarantee of rain is the weekend before Memorial Day. That's not a guarantee that it won't rain, but what I'm betting on is that while people we know don't want to come out for a 107-degree day, they might brave some drizzle in the late spring. Earlier sponsor and vendor recruitment. Likewise, I've begun reaching out to our sponsors from this year, hoping to recruit some of them for next year. Because of the uncertainty around the pandemic last year, we didn't actually get the go-ahead for certain that we were doing this until early spring. And many of our historic sponsors had already closed their fiscal year and their grant cycle. So we're trying to get out ahead of that this year. I'm not going to be able to raise $40,000, but I think that I can get enough to do a smaller event, largely funded through grants and through sponsorships. And then, of course, individual traffic control plans for the flagged intersections. If we do a smaller event, as proposed in the staff report, that in the first place reduces cost by reducing the number of flagged intersections and reduces our reliance on volunteers because it reduces just the overall number of volunteers that we need. And then it also, I will have learned from this last year's experience, and we'll recognize that we do actually need, for any intersections requiring a professional flagging team, a specific traffic control plan for that intersection to avoid that exact kind of miscommunication that we ran into. In terms of proposed routes, I think that if we do move in the direction of a shorter out and back kind of a model, to again avoid those larger streets, to reduce our reliance on flaggers and on volunteers, we could use this as an opportunity to highlight some of the bike routes, some of the greenways, some of the places in the city where we are making those investments in bicycle infrastructure and in active transportation, while also highlighting some of our city's parks. So Monroe, although that is not quite the path of the Monroe Street Greenway, if we were to close just that stretch of Monroe, I think that we could still have a very active event. I think we could still get performers out. I think we could still get vendors out. I think we still have an opportunity for people to come out and interact with their neighbors outside of motorized transportation. We could do something similar on 29th. This would be one or the other. I'm not proposing to close down one stretch of road and then another stretch of road on the same day. These are just ideas. If there are other stretches, I'm open to hearing about those. I'm open to planning around those. But these, I think, are the two that we're in the best position to use if we had to put on the event, say, the weekend before Memorial Day in 2023. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Here again is my contact information for the folks viewing at home. And I give it over to council.
I was thinking about, I know you said not doing it in September, but I was thinking that that would be a great culminating like end of summer event. But I know like with back to school, although it would be a great way for communities to get together with their schools. Is September out of?
I don't think it has to be, Councillor. I think the problem though is that we've got the umbrella parade and the tree lighting just coming right around the corner behind that. And it doesn't feel like they're that close, but in practice, Carefree ends and those start. And if there is any way for me to kind of pry this back earlier into the year, I would really like to find a way to do that. I do take your point though. I mean, I think that on the one hand, we could view it as a way to bring people back together after the summer. On the other hand, if we do it on the front end of the summer, it can be kind of a good kickoff to that season. So I am not here to tell council, no, I will not do that. I would ask that we try May.
I trust you, Dan.
Well, I kind of like the September idea too. I mean, Sunday Parkway's always did, in fact, our first one was October 2nd or something, and we did get rained on. So, I mean, there is a risk. But like a mid-September, like, you know, like now, it's a beautiful time of the year. We're past the risk of 100-degree days. I kind of like the September
For
idea.
another couple of years.
90s.
Yeah. How long are those two routes? Did you measure them?
I did. I don't have the measurements here in front of me, but they're both around a mile. I believe the 29th is like 1.1 miles, 1.2 miles, something like that. And the Monroe route is about 0.95 miles.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
God, it looked like it was longer to me, looking at that map.
It does look that way, but
Yeah.
goes quick.
So having been out at one of the intersections and experienced some of the things, I do see the appeal of having less crossings, of having less flagged intersections. In fact, that 32nd route wouldn't need any flagged intersections, right? I mean, that 29th.
Right.
That Balfour to 29th, you would have just volunteers at intersections. You wouldn't need any flaggers for that. And I did look at the Portland, the Sunday Parkways one that was out and back, and it was quite a long route. It was probably, I don't know, I couldn't find a mileage for it, but it was probably 4 to 5 miles, and it was a zigzaggy kind of L. I guess I do feel like these are too short, but I think we could do like an L that like do the 29th and then continue over to Water Tower and have an L that goes Water Tower and then goes up and uses 29th. Yeah, I guess I just feel like these are routes if you want to take out little kids and have them rollerblading in the street and trying scooters and stuff. They're fun routes for little kids, and like the neighborhoods could do some like little kids events, but it doesn't seem to me that it captures the sort of full range of users that we're trying to appeal to.
Yeah, I would concur with that. My gut is that cyclists will be just like, really?
Yeah.
A mile? Yeah.
I hear that. I think that a lot of what we're going to be able to actually produce is going to come back to this question of how much can be raised. The event, I mean, the event just eclipses anything else that we do. It's a $40,000 event, and it's an event that is budgeted at $20,000. And that's the way that we've done it historically, because historically that funding was available that through grants, through sponsorships. And I'm optimistic that we can get back into the $12 to $15, maybe $20,000 sponsorship range. But if we're drawing $20,000 in grants and sponsorships, that's looking at 2019 money again. And I hope that we can get there. I'm going to work to try to get there. It's an uphill climb.
I know in 2019, our big sponsor was MODA, right?
Right.
I don't know if you guys have had conversations with Providence, but given where we're talking about with some of these routes, there could be a tie-in for Providence, and it could be an appealing thing for Providence to even participate in some way. Yeah.
It absolutely could be. If we do end up working with MODA again, then they tend to end up with a kind of a what am I trying to say? Like a field exclusive.
Yeah.
Not
piece.
to compete.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not exactly the wording that's in the sponsorship agreement, but that's essentially what it comes down to. But that being said, if Providence comes on board, we're not turning away any options at this point, but it is sort of a question of who we can get on board and who we can find to sponsor it and where we can find grant money, if any. So I absolutely take the note about these being shorter routes, probably too short to draw more serious cyclists. And in that way, we're stepping away from the intent of the event a little bit. Absolutely.
Well, and I will tell you that the serious cyclists I know won't do Sunday parkways either. I mean, they're not doing even the bigger events, but it's kind of the bigger kids, the mid-range, the families together, the sort of, the whole intent was to make people who aren't comfortable cyclists feel more comfortable, right? So
It was the families of the serious cyclists.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
They give them an opportunity to bring their kids out.
Yeah.
What about asking NDAs to sponsor food? Like give away free food, like just hot dogs and hamburgers? I mean, because that's what you give away food, folks are gonna come. And our NDAs serve a purpose, so why not just ask them to go buy some hot dogs and hamburgers and have somebody out there with a barbecue just giving away food as well?
Well, we can definitely do that. And I mean, I will say, I can't say enough how much I appreciate the work that Grace Point did on this. I mean, they took their summer barbecue and completely retooled that into being Carefree Sunday event support, which is why between the two of these, much as I do enjoy 29th Avenue, I used to walk my dog there pretty regularly. It's a beautiful street. I am hesitant to move away from Grace Point just because they have been such an active community partner in this.
Well, and from the aspect of which project we're prefetching first, Monroe's the next project, right? 29th is, I haven't even looked at the CIP, but it's further out.
Well, and with that, even if they're the ones providing food, that's one piece of it. And food really isn't where we see the majority of our expense on this. The majority of our expense on this actually comes from working with our consultant for route management. And when I did take this out to bid this last year, we got back from all of the event planning companies that we contacted, and there were 5 or 6 of them in the area. There just aren't that many organizations that do this kind of event, that organize this kind of event. And the price that they charge is significant. I mean, it's a matter of public record. It was over $23,000 for just for the consultant for this last year. So if we do something that requires a consultant involved, we're contracted with the same consultant through the next year if we do use one. And I don't know that a smaller event would, with a consultant, would have that same kind of cost, but we could very well go into this having raised, say, $15,000 and have a $1,500, $2,000 discretionary budget on top of the consultant. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know how feasible that is. So we're hitting a point where if we get all of the food donated, if we do not hire entertainment, if we shrink this down to 1.5 miles out and back, and we need a consultant still, and that comes into the intersections that we're hitting. We're running up against a pretty significant price wall, is what I'm saying.
So what is the tipping point for having a consultant? I mean, what's the hard part that requires somebody that makes $23,000 to plan a
So
4-hour bike ride?
So really the majority of what they do is volunteer management. So the more volunteers that we need, the more that we may need to rely on a consultant. It's one thing to have CERT come out and do a rolling shutdown of Main Street for the umbrella parade. Which I don't mean to undercut that. That's essential work for that event. We absolutely need them. It's a different thing to have people out for 6 hours on a Sunday, pulling in those groups, organizing those groups, giving them the training, making sure that they know how to stop and start traffic and when to do that.
And they also were circulating on the route throughout the whole event and checking in with volunteers and seeing how things were going, making sure that they had enough water and were keeping safe, addressing concerns.
And does
they do a lot.
That fee didn't include the flaggers? We paid flaggers on top of that, or
We
they
paid the
paid the
flaggers
flaggers?
on top of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought they took care of the flaggers.
That was my understanding before I came into organizing the event. But no, the flaggers actually are an independent cost on top of that. So it's not, and it's an essential cost. I mean, there are intersections where you need a flagger. We're not sending bicyclists across King, without a flagger. We're not closing. I mean, particularly once you get down to the west side there was an area where within, I don't know, probably 1/4 mile, we had 3 of our flagged intersections. They're around Monroe, 42nd King, that kind of southwest corner down there. So the more that we can do to avoid needing flaggers, the better off we're going to be. The more that we can do to avoid busy intersections, the better off we're going to be. And it's unfortunate because an open streets event in some ways is asserting the presence of active transportation in the face of automobiles and motorized transport. And that gets expensive to do it safely. So it's not that we can't do a longer route, it's that this is, what we're looking at here are the sizes that I feel confident saying I think we can produce right now in 2023, based on the amount of grant funding that we received in 2022. If the guidance is find a way to do a longer route, well, I'll get to work on that. But this is where we're at right now.
I really want to highlight that I saw some pretty terrible interactions between volunteers and drivers. And I don't want any volunteer to ever have to experience that again. So I hear you when you say that it's important to have the coordination. And I think that it's also important that we create a situation where volunteers can succeed. So I think that's part of what a shorter, denser route is, because part of what, as you've already said, happened is that people didn't see the need, the drivers didn't see the need because everyone was so spread out along the route. So I hear you on needing to have, having professional support for that, I think is really key. In 2019, when we did this event, the intersection I was working at, most of the volunteers there were actually folks who came with Axiom, who did not live in Milwaukie, and did this because they love these sorts of events. So when we use a contractor like Axiom or whomever, the handful that do this sort of work, they all have this pool of volunteers that they can draw upon. So I think that's a hidden benefit that we get for really creating a safe and successful environment. And I guess the other thing I'd say about the shorter route is I have never really experienced this as something that serious cyclists wouldn't be willing to do with their families if it were shorter. You know, we have it set up as something where you ride for a while and you get off and you get some food, you go do some entertainment, you go use the porta potties. You know, it's not like it's a century.
Right.
It's meant to be something that gets people out reclaiming the streets. And I think that you achieve that with a shorter route just as well as with a longer route. I agree that it doesn't have the same impact, but I also understand that it's hard to do this work and to do it well, and that we have no money left over for next year.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Council President Heisey. And to your point, it's true, the majority of the volunteers were not recruited from within Milwaukie. The majority of these volunteers are people from Portland and from surrounding communities who come with Axiom, who come with the consultant. So it's not that we need to step away from using a consultant altogether. If and when we return to a larger route, probably not 5.5 miles anytime immediately in the future, but if and when we return to a larger loop route in the future, we absolutely need to have a consultant for that, just based on the staffing that's required for it. I would like to see us retain that relationship with them for this coming year, but we're not going to be able to pay for a $23,000+ consultant fee.
Yeah.
We're just not.
So
Well, I would,
can I throw out, sorry, this will be quick. This is an idea that nobody is really going to want to hear, but I'll put it out there anyway. I like the idea of September. I understand it's really not feasible, so I'm not saying I don't hear that. But I have had a little bit of conversation, nothing that was a commitment in any way, shape, or form, so I don't want Nicole Perry to worry when I say her name on air. But Nicole is the Safe Routes to Schools coordinator for the Street Trust, and they do in Clackamas County. And I said to her, I think during the Carefree Sunday event, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we were able to do something that was a hybrid between Carefree Sunday and Safe Routes to School, where we chose a route that highlighted ways that students could walk, bike, or roll to school. I think you could actually do that as a, hey, we're getting, you know, as the end of summer celebration. It's a little wonkier, but the point is to help students and families understand that it is possible to use your bodies to get to school safely, and here's how you do it. None of those routes are anything like either of the two that you have up there, so I get it, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
Well, I mean, you could do a pretty nice L using the Monroe and then going out onto Linwood and using the path on both sides of Linwood. It's kind of a P-shaped, a very skinny P-shaped route.
I think it's my job now to break all of your dreams and hopes. So I'm just going to be really honest. I can't do it in September. There's just no chance that we can go in September. So I just want to be really honest that between the events that we're doing in December and the rest of the load, unless we were going to actually remove one of those events and consolidate some of the work on Dan's plate, I just can't deliver it. The second piece is the more places that we add intersection exchange problems, the more expensive it's going to get. So we can do what you're talking about. Mayor, I like how you're thinking through it. But I think Dan really is trying to make this simple enough that we can lift it. If this gets too complicated, we're worried we're going to fail. And the complaints come in and people don't have a good time. So I just want to make sure that we don't have enough money, but we also just focus on the staff resource that we do have during the time we have. So I'm the only part of that you have to hear me on, hopefully, please, is we can't do September. The other parts are open, but I just want to be transparent about what he can lift. Okay, thanks.
I just think September would be so good.
You're
'cause
so helpful.
I'm on PTA now, and like we're talking about like what kind of beginning of the school year event could we hold as PTA, and going like asking all the PTAs to volunteer would be great for a beginning of the year. But we could still get PTAs to volunteer in May, right?
Well, and we can get rid of either the umbrella parade or solstice as well. And those are options too. Thanks.
Counselor
I
Nikki.
totally hear
He
it.
doesn't want to wear that hat.
The guy who killed the umbrella parade. Yeah.
You should see how many scarecrows we have now.
I will say, I mean, having been in an intersection that was near what you're describing as the, sort of the cluster of flagged intersections, I do see that, I did face some pretty hostile drivers. I had King Road. I had the people who didn't turn on 42nd on King Road and wanted to come through. And Debbie Patton from the Lake Road neighborhood was at the next intersection, and we both had our share. And we also had the problem with the flaggers on Harrison not stopping people from coming up 40th. But I will say both of us said at the end of the day, after pulling our hair, it was totally worth it because of all the people who smiled and said thank you on their way through, and we're clearly having fun. So even though it was a relatively low turnout, the people who were doing it were loving it.
Yeah.
And I do think doing an L or something that wasn't a closed loop. I mean, the fact that it was a closed loop also made it harder to direct people to alternative ways to get home. But if you just cross Harrison or you just cross King and you don't create a closed loop, then it's easy enough to have directions to tell people. Because when I did tell people, please go back to 43rd and go around and go up 43rd to 42nd. I mean, some of them did that.
Yeah.
So as long as there's a crossing somewhere, there's only one crossing, you're not having to have a vacant spot in the middle of the
Right.
circle.
Right, yeah.
Right. There were people for whom, there wasn't a really reasonable workaround. Yeah. Because they were in the middle. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, Carefree is a great event. I'm not sitting here trying to get rid of Carefree. In fact, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how do we do Carefree in 2023 and keep it going. People love it, and it's easy to understand why. We don't have anything else like it in Milwaukie, really. And I don't know that there is an independent community organization that is positioned to step in and organize it. So, I mean, in my mind, we should keep doing this, and we should figure out a way to keep the spirit of it alive while reining in the expense of it a little bit. I mean, Solstice has a $6,000 budget for comparison. It's just not, it is just so far out of scale with anything else that we do in terms of events. And that's not a bad thing inherently, but it may not be sustainable with the current model, with the historic model. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at alternatives here, and I think maybe an L, maybe a P.
So what about this? Monroe, down Stanley, cross through the church parking lot and the school parking lot, stay on the, what is it?
West side
of Linwood, going back up. You don't cross Linwood, ever. And you really don't have any big ugly crossings.
42nd is probably one you'd want to flag her
Yeah,
at. But
you might
other than
need
that-
a flagger at 42nd, but.
So what I'm going to jump in and say is I don't know what that costs. So for tonight, I mean, I hear y'all saying that you would like the routes to be different. I think what we would need in order to feel confident to go out and actually secure sponsorships and do any fundraising is for you to know that whatever event we have would have to be done for somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000, and whatever amount of traffic control and flagging that we can pay for with that. We believe we can afford this like that because we feel like we know how to do it. I'm not saying this has to be the thing, but as long as you all know that any route conversations would have to fit into that budgetary context. Because it's okay for you to also to say, this is not good. This isn't good enough for me. I'd rather take 2023 off and do the real event that we like and we care about in 2024. That's perfectly acceptable direction. But I just don't want you to leave this meeting and think, oh, but if we just keep tweaking, that the route will end up being very big And I won't know the answers to how much we can afford until we get a little further along. But what I'm hoping we could leave with tonight is, we know it's smaller, we know it's earlier. We want you to try to do your best anyway. And go for it. Or this just isn't the spirit of Carefree that we want. So if it's going to be that small, don't do it. Like, that's the kind of direction I think I'm looking for tonight.
I'm okay with the earlier.
Yeah.
I don't disagree that September, all of the things, not considering your issues, is better, but I think second to last weekend in May is workable. I think that's ish when the first Sunday Parkways is, isn't it?
Should be around then, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been working other places. I guess what I would say is, let's aim for something a little bit bigger than this, like what I just described, the Stanley Linwood thing, and see what we can get sponsors-wise. And if we don't get enough sponsors, then you can peel it back to this. But, and as far as MODA and Providence, get them in a bidding war.
Yeah, well, happy to take all advice on bidding wars and whatnot, but I just want to make sure if you all are okay. I think what we need, to step a bit, just make sure that we want you to go. We know it'll be smaller. Do your best. I think we're great at trying to do our best, and we'd love to have a route be as good as we can make it. But I do want y'all to know that this is going to feel a little bit more like open streets, like, which can be cool. You know, if you go to large cities, a lot of times it is about the reclamation of space and having humans be in places that vehicles are supposed to be. You can do that in short distances and it feels different than kind of a longer kind of activity-based, like physical exercise kind of thing. And it's a little different, but I think it'll be cool. Dan's good at his job and he's got cool ideas. And I think we've definitely heard you tonight say that if there's a way to make it longer at all, that would be your preference. And you've heard us say, we do not have a lot of money, so we're gonna do our best. Is that a fair synopsis?
Yeah, and I saw the majority of, and I was not standing there with a clicker taking notes, so it's purely anecdotal, but the folks that I did see showing up, those 600 folks, were people with small children and middle schoolers and a couple of high schoolers along. So I felt like the hardcore dedicated folks, I think they will come no matter how long or short the route is. I think they're there for the street festival atmosphere and getting to be on the street with their whole family. So I think we try it. I think we might be pleasantly surprised by how much people are like, hey, cool, this is the thing. We're not going to be dying of heat, so we're going to go do it. Plus, there's a hill, so you'll get to sweat.
There you go.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to my seat because Dan didn't really need my help anyway.
Ah, bye, Kelly. Thanks for coming.
I'll just say one more thing. I know it's going to be shorter. I know it's going to be earlier. And I know you're going to do your best.
Gosh darn it,
very
people
much,
like you.
Well, and I would
Good
just
callback.
say to Counselor Nicodemus that Nicole Perry is a great resource for what you're talking about with your PTA. Because she, even before she was working for the Safe Routes, she was doing that at Linwood, like organizing a bike day where they tried to get the maximum families biking and have prize for the kids.
I'm just thinking, like, they do bikes for books, and I know they do that towards the end of the year. And maybe that could be
would be
another
cool.
way to, like,
Yeah.
you know, you got all these schools doing bikes for books.
Yeah.
You got these kids getting their brand new bikes.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
We can line the route with free libraries.
Like it. Are we, is there,
I think it's...
this concludes my presentation. I'm never sure how these end. Thank you all very much. We'll work on it. We'll come back.
This guy.
Nailed it.
All right, the next item up is the Neighborhood Parks Project, and this will be presented by our Parks Development Coordinator, Adam Moore.
It's that whole thing.
You bring it up. Over there. It's probably gonna tell us it doesn't have the thing. Oh, see, okay. Do this, click on this, share, and then we go down here and click on this, and now you're good to go.
All right. Hi, City Council. Good to see you all again. We have had a tremendously busy couple months since I was last here in June. I've been encouraged to speak in bullet points, so I'm going to try and hit the most important parts. You all have in your packet summaries of the major engagement that we've been doing. Happy to answer happy to answer any questions you have on those. I should note for those watching at home, we are going to dive deeper into the engagement that we've received this past summer at the PARB meeting next week on the 28th. PARB meetings start at 4:30. The discussion on this project will start at 5:30. That's going to be about an hour long. So will be lots of opportunities for people to dive into this and ask a lot of questions. Jumping right into things, just to kind of give you a recap of what we've been doing. We held 2 open houses. The first was at Belfour Park on July 20th. Very hot and steamy night at about 96 degrees. We rescheduled Bowman Bray Park's open house to August 6th because the night that we were supposed to do that one, it was 104 degrees. We also had a planning meeting for Scott Park on August 4th. So this project and this engagement is not all face painting and balloon animals. We actually have to get down to work a little bit, and we did that at Scott Park on August 4th. We did a number of different pop-up engagements. I just want to highlight our work at Juneteenth event. We also did some inadvertent pop-up work at Bowman Bray Park. So I did go to Bowman Bray on the night of the 25th. Part of the challenge with letting people know about events via postcard is that when you have to reschedule for a 104-degree night, it's hard to let people know that you have done that. The neighborhood association and a lot of people were really great in spreading the word, but we felt it best to go hang out at the park during that open house. So I did go in a city vehicle with a cooler, some cool drinks and some popsicles. So thanks to John Hennington and the Equity Program for supplying the popsicles. We did have 4 or 5 people who did show up expecting a meal and an engagement in the park. But I'm very glad that we did reschedule. I did leave a thermometer in the park. I checked it around 8 o'clock before I left, and it said 106 degrees. That also highlights probably why we were hearing so much about shade when we rescheduled for August 6th. But we can dive more into the feedback that we got on the 6th then. We've also been holding some focus groups, and these conversations that we have been having, I will say, have been probably fewer in quantity than we would like to have. We know that this work is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're going to continue to do this work. But the quality of the conversations that we've been having have been really, really important. And I'm very glad that we're spending the work to talk to these people in these more intentional types of engagement. So we held a focus group in Spanish with the BIPOC community on July 13th. We met with people with disabilities twice on July 20th and then last week on the 7th. And then we met with members of our BIPOC community in English on September 8th. Diving into the Belfour open house, so we had 62 people sign in. Looking at how much food we went through and how many kids were running around, we know that we probably had closer to 75 people or more. We learned that night that we do need to have that clicker and keep an eye on how many people are actually coming in, because we do know that, you know, a lot of times families or groups, they're only signing in one person. Some people are just coming by to hang out and see what's going on, and they're not really there to formally participate. So we did that at the events later on. We had 49 surveys that we received in person. Of those 49 surveys, 45% of the people told us that they were new to Milwaukie planning. And that's not new to Belfour Park. The question just asks, have you been involved in Milwaukie planning? And that's a number for Belfour Park, and again, we'll see at Bowman Bray, that I think that we as a city should be really proud of. I think that shows why we need to make sure that we're opening up these park plans that were written, 7 or 8 years ago and getting new people involved. What's interesting about Belfour is that we were talking to a lot of people who had been in the neighborhood a long time. And we had kind of a different experience at Bowman Bray. But sticking with Belfour, we received another 71 surveys online. And through these surveys, and again, the engagement summaries are in your packet. They're also available online for anybody watching at home. But we heard a lot of common themes. Nature design and elements, so that's with our plantings, that's with maybe our playground equipment, having picnic amenities, right? Focusing on community. That includes adding in probably a picnic shelter. This is Oregon. We have a significant amount of rain. We also know that this is COVID money, right? I want to get back to a lot of the point of this project, which is to make sure that people have a safe place to recreate outside, especially if they don't have backyards of their own. And so we did hear a lot about picnic shelters and other picnic amenities, benches, tables, et cetera. Preservation of trees at Belfour Park was huge. We were extremely thankful for all those trees on a 96-degree night. We talked last time in June about the possibility of adding in food forests or things like that. We heard a lot about the fruit trees that already exist in Belfour. We also did, based on your guidance, ask about adding in fruit trees to these parks. We heard a lot about that at Belfour Park. I think Belfour could be a really good place for us to kind of do some pilot projects and experiment, working with different groups to see how we might be able to manage some sort of fruit trees in the future. And I think that's a good place to start there. Jumping into Bowman Bray, so we had 55 people attend. This was a Saturday morning. It was still warm, but didn't get too hot. So 55 people on a Saturday morning, I thought was a really great turnout. We received 36 in-person surveys. I think my favorite part about the Bowman Bray open house is that people stuck around. Even though it was hot, even though we were crowded kind of under tents, getting that shade because we don't have that natural shade there yet. There were people that I had talked to right at the beginning of the event, and when we were packing up, they were still there chatting with their neighbors. A lot of the people that we talked to had said that they had recently moved into the area. And we were able to not only talk about the park and the future of the park, but also of a lot of other things going on in the city. So I think it really turned out to be a really wonderful event. We did send back out postcards for this event. We were able to change the dates and get those back out to people. So we also did keep the online survey open an extra week and then work through our contacts at the Neighborhood Association. The Neighborhood Association down in Leak has been the most engaged group that I think we've been working with on this project, and they've been really great. We also received an additional 52 surveys online, and I forgot to mention, again, just like with Belfour, 42% of the people that we talked to on the 6th in person had said they'd never been to a Milwaukie planning event. So again, that just reemphasizes, what we're trying to do here about bringing in new people into this. Common themes for Bowman Bray and Belfour, and you're going to see this across all 3 parks: children, nature, and community, right? Play structures and swings, adding in a butterfly garden, adding in a picnic shelter. Also heard a lot about possibly a bocce ball court, which we're kind of interested in. I do want to point out that we also heard a great deal about people wanting to have the park connected to Where Else Lane. That is a conversation that we have had, council. I just want to reiterate what I told the Neighborhood Association and what we've been talking to about PARB, is that is our intention to create that access point. We are working through it. There are things going on in the background. The timelines and how that works out, we don't have necessarily control over, but that is still our intention to follow not only that park plan from 2015, but that transportation plan and connect the neighborhoods through the park again. Then Scott Park. So we got down to business with Scott Park on August 4th. This wound up kind of being a 2-part sort of meeting. That was not necessarily our intention, but we started off the evening with a presentation looking at a couple concepts for Scott Park that we put together based on the feedback from May. We then went out into the park and had some dinner and had informal conversations and completed some surveys. So we had 58 people attend at least part of that meeting. 32 stuck around and filled out some surveys in person. We had 97 surveys online just in that 2-week period. Where we're at with Scott Park is we're trying to figure out people's preferred amenities, but we put these together in 2 different concepts. And one of the questions that we asked in our surveying is, which concept do you prefer? And it was nearly 50-50. That's okay because there's a lot of overlap in those concepts. And so people are gonna see from us in October is they're gonna see 2 concepts that are very, very similar with 5 or 6 differences and surveys that try and really hammer down which of those differences are most important to them. But we're starting to get a lot of feedback and we're starting to see a lot of similarity here. And I think that might be reflected in this 51-49% concept sort of thing. Again, the themes are nature, inclusion, and community. One of the things that we talked about at the presentation that I want to make sure that I mention tonight is we know that there is an extremely popular part of this park in between those duck ponds. It is very unsafe right now. It is a very complicated little piece of property. We do not know what exists underneath there. And figuring that out and doing that, making that space safe and doing it properly with the proper restoration work and the proper permitting would be far too expensive for us to deal with that. It could end up costing more than we have for all of Scott Park. And the opportunity cost would be this diagram or the other one that you saw in front of you. And so we feel as though it's the best thing for us to do at Scott Park would be to put that area behind the fence. We can still let people get down close to the water. Both concepts look at creating different places for people to view the ponds in that upper corner of the park near the pond, because we know that that is important to people. But doing it safely, doing it properly is just going to be too much for this project. Talking about engagement goals. So we kicked off very strongly with a focus group with our Spanish-speaking community. We had 13 participants there. We had really wonderful conversations. These conversations were not necessarily specific to one design or one park in particular, but they were focused on experiences. What sort of experiences do you want to have in our parks? What sort of experiences don't you want to have in our parks? What are preventing you from having that, or what are causing them? What sort of amenities are you looking for in parks in general? Looking for themes that we can find that maybe don't necessarily fit for Bowman Bray, Belfour, or Scott, but can work its way into, you know, a master plan in the future or other park designs in the future. So all of these people who are participating in these focus groups, we're keeping in touch with. They are getting personal invites to all of our planning meetings. But I want just to kind of make it clear, like these conversations that we're having, this intentional engagement that we're doing with these communities, it's a little bit different than what we're doing at the planning meetings. People with disabilities, we have been working with in several different ways. And this is based on just what we are experiencing in our engagement with them. We started off with holding just a focus group, inviting several groups of people, whether that be people that we have relationships with or reaching out to advocacy groups and inviting people to a Zoom meeting. What we found is that that is a very difficult time of year to be doing that. And then when you add in the different sort of complications that existed, either somebody wasn't very good with Zoom, but we had to do it on Zoom because others have mobility issues. Some people just aren't good with technology in other ways. We started to break these focus groups up based on that feedback that we were hearing. So what we switched to is doing phone interviews. We've been emailing out our questions and information ahead of time. We've been getting written responses back from people. And then we held a follow-up discussion based on that, asking people after they had a chance to see our questions, to answer our questions, to have more in-depth conversations based on that.
I didn't follow what you said at the beginning of that about how you identified them. I mean, you said some were known to you or known people, but I mean, are there disability advocacy groups you worked through or, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are different advocacy groups, there are different groups that we've been working with. There are individuals that we've identified. In some cases, these are people when we put out our promotional materials for Bowman Bray and Belfour. knowing that those parks are inaccessible at this point, we asked people to contact us if they had mobility concerns or accessibility challenges, and asked them to reach out to us. So
And did
we've been building it many different ways.
Okay. Did you try, I mean, especially with Balfour, I think it's important to focus on Hillside. You
Yeah.
reached out through the county to
So we've been able
identify?
to build a pretty good relationship with Hillside. Hillside Manor, not the park, but Hillside Manor, everyone who lives there is part of a text message group. And so we were able to write up a nice text message that was sent out twice to all the Hillside Manor participants. They all received postcards because of where they live. We were able to build a connection with their community group and their resident advisory group and make sure that they had extra postcards. And we're reconnecting with them again for our work in October. So we also had a follow-up discussion with our BIPOC community last week. We only had 4 adult participants in that meeting, but that meeting went almost an hour longer than it was supposed to. People really care about this and gave us a lot of really good ideas. And what we're doing at all these focus groups is asking people the very questions that you just asked. How do we connect with more people? How do we get your friends, your families, your colleagues? Who are the groups that we need to be building relationships with in order to keep this work going? We know that this work is going to take some time. Unfortunately, this project with its deadlines forces us to try and do this work at the end of summer and beginning of fall when everybody wants to be outdoors, right? They all want to be at Carefree Sunday. They don't want to be stuck indoors talking to us, even about a park. And so we're going to keep working with John and the Equity Steering Committee. We're going to keep working with other city staff to make these conversations happen. But I feel like we've gotten a really good start. I've been doing this, I've been working as a planner since 2011, and some of these conversations are leading to stuff that I didn't really fully understand. And so I think that this is really good, and we're going to continue to do it. Just talking about some of the other engagement that we received. So of the 421 surveys we've received, nearly 26% of those people say that they are new to Milwaukie planning. And then 8.6%, nearly 9%, come from someone who does not identify as white or identifies as more than one race. I should note that counting the individual participants in this project has proven to be very complicated. We have multiple parks and multiple ways to engage on each of those parks. So it's very likely that someone is, because we are asking them to, fill out surveys for Bowman Bray, Belfour, and Scott Park, and that they're going to do that again in October. And maybe some of them even filled out a survey in May. So there's probably a lot of double counting in this. The closest that I can get is looking at the email signups that we have in person right now, and we're at about 264 people that have participated. We know that some more people have participated online. We just haven't had a chance to dive into those surveys that we get online and try to figure out how many unique people we have. I think I will have some time to do that in December, and we can follow back up with that later on in the year. As I mentioned, right, we're going to be looking at these engagement summaries a little bit more in depth on the 28th at the PARB meeting. Most importantly, if people care about this project, if they care about these 3 parks, now is the time to get involved. I cannot stress that enough. I've been going around to the neighborhood association meetings for this last month. We're going to continue to do that, but now is the time to get involved. So on Thursday, we have a playground design presentation. This is designed for decision makers like yourselves, stakeholder groups like PARB, Equity Steering Committee members, neighborhood association members, city staff as well. The public is welcome to attend. This is going to be on Zoom. Again, that's this Thursday, the 22nd, from 5:30 to 6:30. It's designed to give everybody a base level of knowledge on concepts like nature-based play, inclusive play, starting to talk about safety elements and what we need to consider. And the goal is to give everyone enough information that they can provide us with informed feedback in October. October is going to be another very busy month for us, and it is the time for people to speak with us. After October, we're not really going to be able to respond to their feedback in these plans. I've been telling people all along, like, we will take feedback at any step of the way. But this planning process for these concept plans is drawing to a close. And so if you care about these parks and you want to get involved, October is the time to do that. So we will have planning surveys online from October 6th to the 19th. Those will be on Engage Milwaukie. We'll have hybrid planning meetings this time for Scott Park, October 6th, Belfort, October 13th, Bowman Bray on October 17th. Those will all be held at the Leading Library between 6 o'clock and 7:45. We will provide dinner in person. The Zoom links can be found on milwaukieoregon.gov/meetings. We will do the presentation and questions and answers on Zoom. But if you want to fill out a survey, you're going to be asked to go to Engage Milwaukie. The postcard that you see in front of you or on the screen here will be hitting people's mailboxes this week. We're going back out to the whole zip code and most of the UGMA. Because of the way that we mail these out, I can't guarantee that everyone in the UGMA will get one, but we've got a lot of postcards that are going out. We're also working with the neighborhood associations to help us identify areas in their neighborhood where we should put extras. There are already extras at city buildings, and we've identified some businesses downtown where we can start to reach extra people. Just looking again at our development timeline. So we've talked a lot about what we're doing here in the fall, a design presentation on September 22nd. We have special PARB meetings on the 28th and October 29th. Those are going to be longer meetings, talking mostly about this project. On September 28th, the discussion on this project will start at 5:30. October 19th will be a special meeting, and that will start at 4:30 at the regular PARB starting time. As I mentioned, Belfort Park on October 13th, Bowman Bray on the 17th. We'll then be getting into the winter phase where we'll come back to council on November 1st. We will be presenting these plans to the public. Details are still to be determined, but we're looking at November 16th at a special PARB meeting. We're going to nail down the details on this next week at PARB, and we'll present the plans to you all, council, on December 6th. That is a very, very hard deadline for us to meet our goals of getting everything constructed and complete and cutting ribbons by October 2024. And that's all I have for you. Yes.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
With engagement, have you thought about, and I don't know if it's possible, to like reach out to Milwaukie JBO, like the junior baseball, and the Milwaukie Soccer Club, and like having them send stuff out to get more engagement?
We haven't talked to those groups in particular. I think that that is a good idea to look at groups that are using our parks or are participating in athletic activities in our groups. We have been, right now, we've been focused on building a relationship with our veterans partnership. We've been building a relationship with our library boards, our neighborhood associations. I think that's a really good idea.
And can I get some stuff? Because I'll walk up to people while at soccer practice or a soccer game and hand stuff out, and like right where I live, a ton of people walk by, and I'm not afraid to be that crazy dude to be like, hey.
We will be happy to allow you to engage people in that way, yeah.
Okay.
And I assume those cards will be at the farmer's market.
Yes, so we already have a stack that will go to the farmer's market. Any leftover will go to the library. We do already have some at the library, and we're working with library staff to make sure that we try and get those to these groups. I mean, we have 22,000 postcards that are going out, but only about 600 of those are going out around the city in stacks. Most of those are going to individual addresses. And the reason why we are doing that is because we want everyone to have an opportunity to participate. We want everybody to know, and I cannot stress this enough, October is the time to get involved in this project. I will tell you all, just as I told some of the neighborhood associations last week, my phone doesn't ring very often. So if you are listening to this and you want to get involved in this project, give me a call, send me an email, right? We will find a way to talk with you. If you are one of those, if you are a member of one of those communities, if you identify as somebody with a disability or in our BIPOC community and you want to get involved, give us a call. John Hennington and I will come talk to you, or our consultants will reach out to you, and we'll find a way to work you into this project. Your feedback right now will work its way into these plans one way or another, or we will be able to respond to it. Come December and next year, the best we can probably do is work it into the design a little bit. So it's really, really important that people get involved right now and reach on out. Do you all have more questions?
I just wanted to say thank you, and that I knew we were getting 3 parks, but this has really turned out to be a foundational piece for figuring out how to and doing better equity engagement and really practicing different ways of meeting our community where they're at. So I really appreciate that we're headed in that direction. I think you've done a great job of explaining what you've learned along the way, and yeah, I just am excited to have that as sort of this byproduct benefit of this work. So thanks, and I hope it's, you know, stuff that can percolate out into other projects and other ways of engaging in the future on other things that the city is doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think as we talked about when I was first here, like, we are happy to be the guinea pig, and I am learning a tremendous amount on this project as well. Working with John Hennington and the Equity Steering Committee and other city staff has been really rewarding for me. They have been very, very helpful. The conversations that are going on here in Milwaukie in the Pacific Northwest are very different than the ones that I've been having elsewhere when I've lived. And John in particular has been really helpful in bringing me up to speed. A lot of the work that we've been doing has been made possible because they have been pitching in out of their budget so that we can provide food at all of these open houses, which allows us to then make sure that we're sending out postcards to everybody. So, you know, I've always seen this project as having 2 goals. 1, how do we reach new people? And 2, let's make sure we build some really good parks. And I'm pretty confident that we're going to do both of those. We'll see what happens with inflation and supply chains and things like that. I have a lot more control over engagement than I do those things. Just a heads up on that.
Great job. Great presentation. Great work. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
All right.
Before council adjourns, do you mind if I ask a quick question of council?
Sure.
It's regarding the Clackamas Cities Association dinner. And we've proceeded, I can confirm that we've secured a venue, the Masonic Lodge and the library and a caterer. So things are progressing. We're getting ready to send an invitation out. We had lined up an update at the on the library. That's still nailed down by staff. But we have had 2 competing, not necessarily competing, but 2 ideas for the other main topic present itself. One being an update on the city's SAFE project, probably particularly on the Linwood project. And then also the Kellogg Dam removal has also been proposed. Thinking just about how these tend to run and the amount of time we have, probably best to pick one or the other, especially since the library is also being involved in there as a topic. So if council wouldn't mind providing a little feedback to staff on which of those 2 topics you'd like us to run with.
Well, how long is is it a half hour?
That's typically 20 to 30 minutes is what, by the time you get folks seated and fed, and then, 7:15 to 7:45 is generally what we're looking at.
I mean, I think you could do both. You know, you could give each 10 minutes. I don't know that I see them as at odds. I suggested the dam as an add-on, not thinking of it needing 20 minutes, but thinking that it is something where down the line, we may need support from some of these people for funding asks. So that was my rationale for putting it in there, to say, hey, because we took people, I mean, not that it's going to be all the same people, but we took people by the dam and showed it and talked about it before, and to say, hey, there's an opening and it might actually move. And but I don't think that has to be a long thing,
Yeah, I think you could probably even do that in 5 minutes, really. It's just an update on where we are with the dam. And I think for most of the other cities, our SAFE program is more apropos to what they might be doing. They don't all have dams, right? So I think if the bulk of the presentation was about the SAFE program and then 5 minutes on, as an update on the dam. It seems like we could be able to make that work.
Great, I think that's pretty good clarification for staff.
I think one other, we have limited involvement in the dam right now. So we can either invite somebody to come talk if you'd like, or we can have a staff person. The staff person who's going to be presenting SAFE is going to be Jen Garbley. So we can have her mention it, but she won't have much detail.
How about Neil?
I mean, I haven't talked to Neil, but I mean, we could invite him.
Okay.
Or we could, I mean, I think, yeah. Or
Have
we
him
can
come?
get a couple slides from him that Jen can add to her thing. I mean, either way, we can probably.
Or one of us
I'm
can
going
do
to
it?
probably invite him then.
Yeah.
And see if he can do it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. After the work session, council will meet in an executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statutes, ORS 192.6602H, to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. With that, we are adjourned on the work session, and we will see you at 6 for the regular session. 5-minute break while people